Thank you all for coming this afternoon. Good to see a good crowd out. Of course, this is now going into the second week of tracking Invest 99L, and things may get interesting. We may be tracking it for a few more days here still. So this week we have Dr. John Nese from the department.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for organizing these. So, not much going on. Big news in Florida this morning, of course, is another explosion as they tried to launch. SpaceX tried to launch another, well, they were testing their rocket. This company seems to blow up a lot of rockets. They're the ones that supposedly supposed to send probes to Mars by 2018. That's the smoke on radar this morning from the Melbourne radar. Anyways, no, that's not what's going on in Florida. So Hermine, Florida State, is closed at noon today through tomorrow in anticipation of near hurricane force gusts in Tallahassee. I'm going to click on these links in real time. So there's the latest radar. Some of the outer bands getting very close. Let's take a look at the latest HER. So you believe, I can't get it to stop, but if you believe this, the center comes inland somewhere near Apalachicola, round about, I don't know, 10 o'clock this evening. And that track right there would take the center very close to Tallahassee. The last U.S. hurricane in the Hurricane Center does have this a hurricane, as I'm sure most of you know by now, by landfall. Gosh, I can't get these to stop. So this is going through the whole history. I guess it will stop there at the end. So there's the latest. I went ahead and put the 5-day track on there. There's a lot of ambiguity about what happens Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. But the indications are, as I suspect many of you know, there's some suggestion that this thing stalls out here somewhere, or maybe even down here. And stalling tropical system, acting in some ways like a nor'easter by that time, though it's back over the water. European has this thing transitioning to a hurricane well offshore by 0Z Tuesday. So I think there's a lot of ambiguity out here. But the first part of this track is probably pretty solid. So beyond Florida, heavy rain, eastern half of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, even southeast Virginia seems pretty certain. Coastal flooding and strong winds along the shore north of the storm could be really significant if this thing stalls. And it's worth noting that the 0Z European re-deepened it to what looked to me to be a 960 to 970 millibar hurricane by 0Z Tuesday, safely offshore, but a hurricane nonetheless. So when was the last hurricane landfall in the United States? Assuming this thing becomes a hurricane, when was the last hurricane landfall in the U.S.? Arthur. The last landfall of a hurricane into Florida? 2005, Wilma. So it's been almost 11 years. Sort of very unusual stretch, but though there have been 10 tropical storm landfalls in Florida since then. Anyway, I'm going to go back to Hermine, but it's September 1st, so let's just say a little bit about the summer. Tied for the warmest summer on record in State College. For those of you who track dew points, I went back and I took a look. For the 3-month period, June through August, I averaged all the hourlies for the last 16, 17 years, and this past summer was certainly above average. The muggiest summer on average in 6 years. But there really were some dry days in June that offset the really muggy period. I learned a new word this summer, reading a book called Decisive, because I want to be more decisive in my old age. The Gemba is a Japanese term that means sort of the real place. It's a word that means sort of, you know, when a crime occurs, if you want to understand the crime, you got to go to the crime scene. That would be the Gemba. If you want climate data, you got to go to the Gemba, which is the National Weather Service. There's a lot of places on the internet that publish climate data, and it's my experience that a lot of them are wrong. So when it comes to climate records, the Gemba is the National Weather Service. It was the warm nights in State College. I know this is hard to see, but according to our records here, if you look at the average low temperature for both August and the whole summer, it was the highest in the 121 years of record keeping. So that's what made it a warm summer. It was the warm nights. Now the days were warm too. August was the 14th warmest. The summer as a whole was the 26th warmest out of 121, but it was really the warm nights that did it. Transitioning back to the tropics, it's worth noting that if you list the top 10 wettest 24-hour periods in State College in the period of record, one of them occurred this summer. Anybody who was here back on August 10th, which of course goes in the books here as August 11th, experienced 3.42 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. Many of the other wettest 24-hour periods were associated with tropical systems. Ivan, Agnes, Connie, I don't even remember, Burl, Sandy, and anyway, that's a nice transition back to, we're not going to get a lot of rain unless something really weird happens. We're not going to get a lot of rain from this tropical system. Rich was here last week, and he motivated me to save the 7-day or 168-hour forecast from last Thursday from both the GFS and European, valid 12Z today, just so we could see 7 days ago. And this is, the GFS, to its credit, had a low over northern Florida at 12Z this morning. The European, that would have been it right there, was a little stronger, but it had a low in southeast Georgia. So if we were using the model 7 days ago to hint at what the weather map this morning might look like, we might have put a low of tropical origin in, you know, somewhere along the Florida-Georgia line, which, considering the thing is out in here and has been delayed, it seems, forever. As Michael mentioned, I think, in his preliminary remarks, we first called this thing Invest 99L 2 weeks ago, August 18th, so it's been a long time. Sea surface temperature anomalies, and I show this for two reasons. One is due to some recent rains in the northern Gulf, what used to be fairly pronounced warm anomalies are now sort of average. Not that the water's not warm, it is. So in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies, at least this thing's not feeding off of extraordinarily anomalously warm waters. It also has picked up speed, and so those two factors, I think, will tend to not allow it to strengthen too much, though I do believe it'll be a Category 1 hurricane at landfall. What also caught my eye was here off the East Coast, the waters are anomalously warm, and so if this thing gets back out in here, I mean, I think next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday could be interesting. Anyway, so those are sort of my preliminary thoughts. So let's look at some weather. So here's your latest view of the Atlantic. Gaston on the way out. Hermine looks like it's starting to develop an eye of sorts there in the northeast Gulf. What else do we see here? We see the front that went through here, or is still in the process of going through here in terms of its cloud shield last night. And then a little bit farther north, we'll see this better on the IR, you kind of see the outline of the mid-latitude trough that's coming southeastward out of Canada. And all of these things, this front, this trough, to some extent, and Hermine will all kind of interact to some extent in the future. So just to dispense with the overly hyped, my gosh, there was one, was it not Slate, it was, I can't remember the online publication, 2 hurricanes about to smash into Hawaii. I mean, come on, people. Although Madeline did, there were hurricane watches posted for the Big Island, right? But I didn't see anything significant other than some rain happen. And then there's Lester, which is, believe it or not, forecast to go north of the Big Island. So Madeline and Lester. Here's the other satellite image that gives us another view. So here's the cold, sort of the cold pool associated with the mid-latitude trough. There's the front, and there's Hermine. Just getting local with you here. Clouds starting to break in central PA. This is not unlike what the sky often looks like behind a cold front here in central PA. You can see the low-level winds are shifting to the north. And sort of extrapolating from that, you would expect skies to continue to slowly clear, with still the Q having a little bit of vertical development to them, but it does look like we're about to enter into a much more comfortable air mass. Not that it's not already getting more comfortable. Dew points down to 61 here. Winds have gone north across most of the state. Dew points to the north are well into the 50s, so you would expect with time a more comfortable and somewhat cooler air mass to advect in here. You can see the showers associated with that front are well to our south, though it does look like Allentown even had a little bit of rain at the last observation period. So how about the current radar? We already looked at the main deal, but the front shows up pretty nicely there. Looks like the cold air aloft is probably igniting a couple random showers back over lower Michigan. And then we already kind of looked at Hermine. So what do I have here? Try to do things a little bit different than Rich did last week. He showed a lot of those beautiful ensemble products at the website that's sort of sponsored by the Weather Service and Penn State. I'll look at some different products, but starting with the 9Z ensembles. Those of you who are familiar with these products know that this is the average of all the ensemble members. This is the short-range ensemble forecast. You have to see if I can get this. All right, so there's the. Give myself a little more space here. This is initialized in 9Z, so we'll push forward. This is 21Z today. There's Hermine, precipitation from the front. Pretty robust, fairly strong area of high pressure coming out of central Canada. Pushing forward 12 more hours to 9Z tomorrow. Hermine, according to the ensemble mean, is now inland. That's going to be a very windy situation for the state capital there. And they are preparing for hurricane force gusts there. There are a lot more trees in northern Florida than you might think when you think about Florida. So there are some serious concerns about tree damage there. Meanwhile, for us, Add Nese tomorrow. It's all northerly flow and high pressure building in. 12 hours beyond that, late tomorrow afternoon, Hermine, or what's left of it, probably still a tropical storm at that time, is in Georgia. All kinds of heavy rain, eastern Georgia, eastern South Carolina, and getting into eastern North Carolina. Meanwhile, here tomorrow, high pressure in control, maybe a few puffy cumulus clouds, but it really looks like a pretty nice day tomorrow. 48 hours from now, so now you're 5 a.m. Saturday morning. The SREF ensemble suggests the center is still in South Carolina. And here, it's often said on the outer fringes of a hurricane, the weather's usually pretty nice. I'm not saying that's a hurricane, I'm just saying that. Something else to keep in mind here, this is a lot of cool, dry air, so this thing by this time is really dragging cooler, drier air into its backside. Meanwhile, still very tropical out here, so this thing's making the transition to post-tropical, certainly by this point. And then by later in the day, middle of the game on Saturday afternoon, again, this is an ensemble mean, so you're not seeing individual ensemble members. A couple of the individual ensemble members, or at least one of them, wants to bring some sort of sprinkles into southern Pennsylvania by this time, but unlike yesterday's 12Z runs when it looked like, you might have to put the chance of a shower if you read it verbatim for the game. I'm not so much thinking that now, and I suspect the game's going to be just fine. 70s. Just for jollies, let's take a look at the, this is the 0Z European. Of course, the New European's not in yet. But that's your European model forecast for 0Z on Saturday. So the center's still in South Carolina. And this is the run that then takes that center, moves it north, and then kind of stalls it, and it sits there. And that would present serious coastal flooding issues. This particular positioning there'd be problems in Jersey and New York. A little bit farther south than that, you'd have to worry about the Delmarva as well. I don't know that the position of this thing this far in advance is well known at this time. That's a real uncertainty. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 12Z runs. So this is the most recent deterministic run. So this is not an ensemble product. This is the NAM. So this is the most recent run, which I did look at before I came in. So here's 0Z this evening, 3Z, 6Z. The NAM is a little bit slower than the GFS, which moves this thing much faster off to the northeast. If you believe this thing's still not inland at 2 a.m. Eastern time tonight. But it tracks it across southeastern Georgia and then pretty much parallels the coast and reaches Hatteras by around, this is 3Z on Sunday. So this is 11 p.m. Saturday night. The NAM has this thing at Hatteras. And beyond that, it hugs the coast and then kind of backs up on itself. And hangs out farther south than the 0Z European had it. Now, the GFS has a somewhat different solution. As I suggested, it's faster and takes a similar track, but gets it to Hatteras much sooner. This is Saturday at 11 a.m. So it's a much faster solution. And then beyond that, the GFS takes it out and then curves it back. So the models are suggesting with different locations, that's, by the way, a very bad day at the Jersey Shore. Don't need me to tell you that. That is Sunday, Labor Day weekend, at the Jersey Shore, and Monday ain't much better. So coastal residents from Norfolk all the way north to really southern New England are going to have to pay serious attention to this. Notice the GFS brings decent rains even into, well, decent, what's the definition of decent? It looks like there's a band in eastern Pennsylvania Sunday morning. Again, this is the deterministic run. The NAM, if you want to be Pennsylvania focused here, or Jersey Shore focused. This is Sunday. I mean, even that's a pretty windy day at the Jersey Shore. Very windy day. The rain stays a little bit closer to the coast in that scenario. The Weather Service QPF for the days 1 to 3. I mean, I think the message here is that heaviest rains, coast, and eastern half of the Carolinas, Georgia, southeastern Virginia. A little bit of rain gets into southeastern PA. That would be near the end of this period, Saturday night. New moon is September 2nd. It's tomorrow. So, I mean, it would be worse, I think, if the new moon was the 4th rather than the 2nd in terms of the tides. I do think that the suggestion here of this thing stalling means that there's going to be a prolonged period of northeast winds along some stretch of the coast, which is, the exact details are yet to be determined. But coastal interests from Hatteras northward to northern New England certainly have to pay attention. And I do think there's a real question mark as to what happens when this thing gets back out over water. Does it become post-tropical? Now, if you look at the Hurricane Center has it post-tropical, I believe. We should go back and take a look at the official Hurricane Center forecast. Would be a good place to take a look, which I think is so. Note that the official Hurricane Center forecast in this period, which I believe is still very uncertain, has it post-tropical, even Monday and Tuesday. But if you look at the 0Z European, it's a hurricane, and it has an eye. And it's somewhere between 960 and 970 millibars based on my read of the data. And it's out in here. It's safely offshore. But that would still lead to a prolonged period of northeast winds crashing into the coast. Any way you slice it, it doesn't look like a very nice, what's the definition of nice? Some people define that differently. Along Delmarva and the Jersey Shore, Long Island, it's a troublesome, from a weather standpoint, weekend there. As far as we're concerned here, I see that it's 9:58 or 12:58, and I'll get the hook soon. If I had to go on record with a game forecast, I would go with sunshine through high clouds, maybe enough low-level moisture gets in here that there's some cumulus as well, but the humidity's low, dew points in the mid-50s, maybe 75 at kickoff, not much wind, but what wind there is east-northeast. After that, if I use my last minute and then maybe take a question or two, it's worth noting that there's pretty good agreement in the 8 to 10 day period So this would govern the period, what would 8 to 10 days be? That would be the 8th through the 10th. That 500 millibar heights are quite high, and there's another warm-up. So after we get through whatever somewhat cooler, drier air mass comes in, there's another warm-up in the 8 to 10 day, 7 to 10 day period here. So summer's not done with us yet. And anyway, comments or thoughts or questions? Marissa says I have 1 minute. Anybody have a different take on the game forecast here? What could go wrong? Well, I don't mean on the football field. I don't. It's not what I meant. Could it go wronger than that? Of course it could. I don't think I had my optimistic. I don't think I had my optimistic glasses on here. I think that's the most likely forecast. Yes, sir.
Yeah, John. I mean, I think your point. When I look at that GFS, that's almost shades of sandy light. So your point about close to new moon, a long period, the people, New Jersey, New York City, down to Delmarva even, have got to start thinking about storm surge issues.
Yeah.
That may turn out to be a bigger story than a minimal Cat 1 going inshore in Florida.
If it's not tropical, will the Hurricane Center issue their new storm surge watch warning product?
That, I'll bet, is a discussion that is going on.
Because they do have a new product this year.
Well, it's a prototype.
It's a prototype
That's what's confusing.
storm surge watch and warning.
Prototype.
Yes, this
Prototype.
Is 11 years after Katrina. It's now a prototype.
It's a prototype. Okay. Of course, the wind direction's different here.
Yeah, but
Probably.
that's quite a dangerous situation setting up. If that's, again, 5
Right.
days, lots of uncertainty. But that may be a much bigger story than the reckless 99L. Is it 20 knots or 30 knots that we've had to endure on Twitter?
And as a related human impact story, I didn't look, but I wonder if there are any college football games being played where it will be raining hard on Saturday. I didn't look if there's any overlap.
It's a huge economic hit. Look at Hatteras North.
Sure, it's a holiday weekend, but I already covered that. I mean, it's...
This is hundreds of millions of
Yeah.
dollars lost. Okay.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Ellie Abrams, McWeather.
It's not. I emailed Pat.
The one in the studio.
The one over Up in the air, taking their stuff. They waited till the last minute, so I'm not sure.
Right, right.
That is a pretty strong signal.
I emailed Chad before this
Well-
to say, can you go